Good evening, America. My name is Blaze Fitzgerald Ryan the First, and welcome back to another excellent episode of A24 on the Rocks. This is the last week I'm going to be a cheap ass because I'm really starting to feel bad, and I'm sure there's some conspiracy theories about my well-being. So for the last week, I'm going to be having Mike's Harder half and half lemonade, and then I'm going straight whiskey after that. Next, to introduce themselves, a man making his triumphant return after a 2-week hiatus.
I'm back. It's Cole William Whitlaw Gibson. Tonight I am drinking some Japanese whiskey, some Suntory whiskey. I don't really know if that's how it's pronounced. I'm feeling good, feeling missed, glad to be back, and I'm excited to talk about Kevin Smith and the True North trilogy. Up next we have...
Good evening, world. This is Kevin K-Con Konachek, and tonight I am drinking Jefferson's Ocean Aged at Sea, straight bourbon whiskey, very small batch, Voyage 25, and that's a mouthful, but it's a birthday present that I got from my wife, and it's quite delicious. I encourage everyone to give it a shot. So, next up we have...
Hey everyone, it's Kelly. Thanks for joining me and the rest of these people once again for another episode. Tonight, I am drinking Journeyman Distillery's Featherbone Bourbon Whiskey. It is handmade and organic, and also extremely delicious, made in Michigan. Next...
This is Eric Kiska. I'm also drinking Journeyman Distillery Featherbone Bourbon Whiskey. It's in the far southwest corner of the state, which is also what we like to call up north for Chicago people, because their whole up north in Illinois is just a bunch of bullshit. So, yeah.
What's with the Illinois dig?
You know what it is.
He woke up and chose violence.
You fucking know what you did.
You know what?
How we start.
You're lucky this movie's on my shit list
Literally,
bigger than you guys.
the whole west side of Michigan, all the Chicago people just swarm it during summer. And it's up north for Chicago people, for sure. See a bunch of Cubs flags around there.
A24 on the rocks.
All right, we'll get
A movie to talk about, I think.
This week, tonight, we are doing a movie called Revenge of the Green Dragon. This movie has a very interesting premise. I'll give you the quick elevator pitch, like we always do. This movie is about a young boy named Sonny and his eventual friend Steven, and their rise in the gang wars of the late 80s and early 90s in Queens, New York. So it's basically about their trial by fire and the racism and drugs, women, all the bad stuff for you, corruption, and it's how they're trying to make their way in life through gang violence. Now, quickly, I wanted to touch on this because I thought this was one of the most interesting things about the movie. So I want to set this up as in, given the information I'm about to tell you, what was your expectation of this movie if you had not heard of it before, like myself? So this movie was executive produced by the great Martin Scorsese, who did The Departed, Goodfellas, The Irishman, the list goes on and on. And the two directors were Andrew Lau and Andrew Liu. Andrew Lau is famous for making Infernal Affairs, which I had never heard about either. But apparently, The Departed is directly based off of that film. So you know that this Andrew Lau guy has some pretty good chops as far as direction goes. And then to even add more intrigue to the story, this is actually based on a 1992 New Yorker article by Frederick Danman. And I tried to read the article, but even though it was made on November 8th of 1992, it is still behind the New Yorker paywall. So, given all of that, and you know that it was going to be in the mob-esque genre, what was everyone's expectations going into this movie? Had you heard of it before? If you haven't, knowing all that, what would you have thought that movie was going to be?
I guess the first time I heard of it was actually on the A24 Film Club, which is our good friends group on Facebook that we encourage everyone to join. But a lot of people said this was one of the worst A24 films of all time. And I also looked up the Rotten Tomatoes score, and it got 15% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it is, I think, the worst reviewed A24 movie on Rotten Tomatoes, too. If I was looking at, like, oh, Martin Scorsese produced this, and it's a movie based on a true story from actual crimes that happened in the 90s, yeah, I'd be intrigued to watch it, but then everything I've heard about it elsewhere made me not intrigued to watch it whatsoever.
I wanted to try to get past the bias of knowing all of that stuff, and wanted to try to get a reaction from some other perspectives. So I put the title of the movie into Reddit, and it pulled up a bunch of posts from 7.5 years ago when the movie came out, and it was actually people looking at the trailer, seeing that Scorsese was attached to the project, and being legitimately excited for kind of what could have been, another addition into the gangster genre novella that comes out with Scorsese attached to it. And I think people were generally excited to see what could come out of it. Asian culture isn't generally represented in gangster scene, and especially in film. And if you look at this on the outside and the surface, you take all the elements that Blaze just talked about, right? Having someone who's got a lot of chops and a lot of great history with some gangster film. You put Scorsese, who seems to be like the godfather of the American gangster movie, and on paper, this looked like it could be awesome. And we're going to get into the details and why it was anything but awesome. But the expectation was definitely there that this could have been great.
If I could weigh in, I would say pretty much the same thing that Kevin just said. I think he stated it really well. I heard of this movie just for the reviews and ways that people felt about it, but like always, I just try to ignore that because I have unique taste. I don't have to hear what everyone else thinks about things to make up my opinion. So, that in mind, and then also I'm not super well-versed in mobster and gangster movies at all. It's not really anything I ever check out, but I was interested in this just because it's called Revenge of the Green Dragons. It sounded like a new take on mobster films, and I was excited to see all the influences that may be pulled in this case. So my thoughts were, maybe everyone else is wrong.
I knew nothing about this film prior to, right before we started, talking about how this was our next movie, and we looked, I looked it up or whatnot. But, initial reactions when you got the guy who is apparently a very very good director for Hong Kong, makes basically the movie that inspires The Departed. Scorsese, crushes that. And then they team up to make a movie about, a mob in New York and Queens and stuff from, like, the, an Asian American or Chinese perspective. I thought, that's going to be awesome. And then you throw Ray Liotta in it. It's like, well, it can't be that bad, can it? Turns out it can. All of the, people were right. I had high expectations. Well, I didn't have high expectations because I saw the reviews, but I was like, it can't be that bad. Yeah, I don't know. It's just...
Yeah, listen, I went into this completely blind because I had heard through the grapevine that the reviews weren't good, but I was really just getting ready to watch this film. It had everything that I wanted for it lined up. I was just completely shocked at the result because this was really just I thought it was going to be that great, not really Scorsese movie, but Scorsese-esque movie that was going to be cool and underground, and we could tell all our friends about how much we know more about movies than them. But unfortunately, we have to get into the story now. So I'm going to be as objective as possible at this. I'm not going to try to be too biased because I really did like the first 10, 15 minutes of this film. I thought the way that the camera was done, Scorsese-esque, and the way that Sonny, who had lost his mom, this whole indentured servant thing felt really real in the way that they portrayed it at first. The way that they just tossed it on to Steven's mom. You could call me it. And then, so I guess what I wanted to ask you guys was, this is based on pretty real shit from what I understand. Can you guys believe that this was happening in the 80s and early 90s where people were basically living in a third world country within the United States? And I just wanted to wonder what you guys thought about the way that the film was at least set up to show them really go through the poverty that I didn't think anyone in America had gone through since the 1800s.
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
you never believed that? Have you ever walked around rough parts of an urban area? You don't think that that's going on in America?
You think that's comparable to endangered indentured servants?
Yeah,
Paying $30,000.
We know that human trafficking happens. It's not right in your face, but human trafficking and slavery from human trafficking is definitely a thing in the United States, and I knew it was. I mean, like in the 80s and 90s, yeah, definitely it was happening back then.
I'm not denying it's not. I'm just saying that they were claiming, at least in the movie, that, hundreds of people were moving there every week. So this wasn't like some small subsect of, this wasn't some like 30-person compound. This was an entire section of the city that was blocked off because due to racism and stuff like that. And I think that the way they portrayed that beginning and the snake mom was very troubling, especially for something that I didn't know about personally.
Well, as we learned, is that Snake Mom is this is the largest instance of it ever happening that's been caught, at least. So I think that I agree with you, Blaze, that like the way that it started out and the way that they did have the interesting shots. I always love putting presidential speeches behind action-y and horrible things happening in America is always a good intro to getting into a movie. Found that interesting. I think that the start of it was not bad, and it furthered my thought that I guess everyone else was wrong about this. This is going to be a good movie. Cole?
Yeah, I going off what you said, Blaze, human trafficking, we hear about it all the time, but I don't know, in like my mindset, or from a lot of the films and the way media portrays it, it always seems like it's Americans being captured and shipped off somewhere else, like a little Taken-esque or whatnot, not people being brought into America to then be turned into, indentured servitude and stuff like that. Obviously, this is, based off of real events, and like Kelly said, this is the largest they ever stopped, so who knows which ones they didn't stop, but still pretty eye-opening and pretty interesting. And it was again, I liked the take of doing it from the Green Dragons, which was like a real mob organization that existed that I had no idea about, didn't know anything about, and the fact that it happened in the 80s and 90s is pretty it just puts it in perspective that we as humans still suck no matter what. So Kevin?
Yeah, I really thought that the whole timing, place, setting, and topic was probably the most interesting part about this entire movie. As far as going from what we can actually discuss about it, it does talk about a certain unknown, necessarily unknown, but less talked about part of our history. It definitely looks at, they talk about Ellis Island way back, right, when the first people started coming over. They talk about the Irish, and they talk about, the Germans, and they talk about everybody else. But now we're here in the 80s, and now we have an influx of Chinese individuals and Koreans and all the other parts that lead to this story. And I think that part being a reality and part of our history in America is very, very telling. I had notes that within the first couple of moments, we know that this movie is going to have a commentary on the border situation, immigration debate. We know that right away as a viewer. That's not going to be a hidden topic. And I think that is a good thing. That's how you should start out a movie. You should know that that's kind of going to be your intent. And he talks about the American dream, right? And he says, well, this is not going to be that movie. And it really just kind of gives that setup of, bleakness, and regardless of how you think the rest of this movie is going to go, it's going to be kind of dark. And then, of course, we follow it in right away with the harassment and the selling of the children and the hazing and just all of the aggressive things that scenes really start to go with. And it's a jolting feeling for that viewer. You're really like, wow, this is intense. This is a variety of something that I've never really seen before. And as seeing from a documentary, from a movie standpoint, it was kind of like, all right, now we'll talk about the how they captured it, whether it was good video or cinematography and all that jazz. But the subject itself and the topic was real, and it was definitely worth discussing, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, very, very good, well put. So then the movie kind of deviates from there. So quick backstory is that Steven's mom doesn't like Sonny, from what I can tell, because she stuffs him full of like dumplings and doesn't give Sonny any. And you would think that, given that, you would probably, like, my initial thought was that they were going to grow up to be rivals and rival gangs and stuff like that. But as it turns out, that Steven had a soft spot in his heart for Sonny, and he ends up giving him dumplings at school. And then comes one of the weirdest scenes in cinema history, where he really has to use the restroom, And this is my next major point, and I know I'm going to touch up on it again later because that's kind of what the movie's about. But it was our first taste of what I call hyper gore. There is a kid in the bathroom getting the shit, like, literally kicked out of him. You can see, like, it almost looks like there's, like, knife wounds and stuff. His face is split open, and it's by this Green Dragon gang. And I just want to know what you guys thought about, like, compared to, like, again, I hate to compare it directly to Martin Scorsese films, but since it is, like, trying to be Scorsese-esque with, you know, the flashback talkings, the time jumps, yada, 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 how did you guys feel about this deviation of, like, brutal torture, brutal rape scenes, children getting beat up, children getting threatened to have their, you know, penises cut off? I mean, was that a turnoff for any of you? Did you enjoy it? Did you like them going that edgy? A movie like Spring Breakers hit that point dead on the head of, like, what's going too far versus, you know, art. I feel like this one was, like, just way out there. Like, sometimes it got, like, Human Centipede.
Stop trying to push your Spring Breakers agenda on us, Blaze.
know.
We know what you're up
We're
to.
far removed.
Nobody ever,
Done with you.
nobody ever shit on a kid in Spring Breakers.
All right, I'm going to take this one because I also thought that scene was ridiculous. Throughout this entire movie, there are so many different examples of them trying to do something and then just pushing it way too far, or a scene lasting 10 seconds longer than it needed to, or a dialogue that wasn't necessary. And that's how I felt about all the moments of the gratuitous violence and just the over-the-top gangster style. It was almost like they were trying to say, well, it's so violent and so over-the-top, then that's what made it art-housey. I don't really know if that's kind of what the intention, but it turned me off as a viewer right off the get-go. And maybe it was the bias going into it, knowing that it was bad, and feeling like, oh, kind of, we talked about it in previous movies where it's so ridiculous what you're seeing on the screen that you can't really take it seriously anymore. And that's how I feel about the violence in some of the circumstances. But I will say, since we're talking about the early scene, that the acting job done by the two younger versions of Steven and Sonny, where they were both done very well as they were getting initiated and going through that process of becoming Green Dragons and having to deal with murdering people and all that. I thought the kid actors did a pretty good job, and that's my take on that.
Okay, so we named the first thing that is good about this movie was the kind of setting and what we're going to talk about. The other thing for me, I thought, was the violence. I thought that the violence was well done. I didn't think that it was too over the top. For me, it was more the way that it would be edited and like the very 80s kind of freeze frames and slow-mos. And I know that it takes place in the 80s, but this wasn't a well done execution, especially some of the gun scenes were just really, for lack of better word, and for one that's overused, it was cringy.
Freeze frames. Oh my gosh.
But as far as like the violence, I think that when it comes to, not that I am familiar with this lifestyle, I don't think that you can shy away from too much. Probably these people have seen a lot more than even what was shown on screen, and I have no problem with violence. I can always, it's always
use more.
Great to watch is what I was gonna say. It sounds messed up, but
that first,
I think that they execute it well, and they make you scared for them. They're just little kids.
That first gun fight in the alleyway with them just shooting and like the barrel flashes, just crappy CGI. It was the worst. It was something you'd see in like Bollywood. It was just terrible.
Yes.
Yeah, I wrote down in my notes, little kids could never take this much of a beating. Like, I'm sure that, these kids probably were beat up, but that was like, they were really beating the shit out of them. Like, that probably that didn't happen in real life, that much of a beating.
Yeah,
I believe that maybe kids were taking shits on other kids' chests, but like, I also wrote down like
Why are we laughing?
I wrote down Stephen King bullying. Like, a lot of Stephen King movies.
Oh.
Yeah, you have like the really, really bad bully that like it's like top. There's you've had I got bullied when I was a kid, but there was in Stephen King movies there's always like a really crazy bully that is like whipping out switchblades and like putting in their people's noses, and I'm like, that's like way too far. And I don't know. I just think they really overdid the violence, actually.
You know what's funny? My exact thought was, like, when I was writing down my notes, I was like, I don't know if you guys ever saw the live-action Dragon Ball, but there's a hilarious scene where the bullies, like, literally tried to hit Goku's on his, like, mini bike. And I'm like, you're really going to pull manslaughter at, like, during a school day? Like, that was the exact same amount of violence that these little boys were receiving. Like, that... Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just gonna kind of piggyback off everything where I really, really hated all of the action scenes in this movie. I thought they were all atrocious, and it made me very sad every single time I had to watch it, and like the way they were edited and cut. And I was like trying to give the director like an excuse of, I know like a lot of times, American films make their way over to Asian stuff later, and maybe he was still following a lot of those 80s tropes and stuff. But like, I looked up one of my favorite Hong Kong films, Hard Boiled, which if you haven't seen it, it's amazing. It's like a pure action, just insane gunfighting and stuff all over the place. And that was made in 1992, and this was made much later. So this guy has no excuses for how terrible any of those action scenes were. That's my 2 cents. I hated all the action scenes. I wish he would just never make a movie again. But go ahead.
So basically what happens is Steven gets kidnapped and tortured, and he's gone for a long time. It doesn't seem like anyone cares about him except for Sonny. And Sonny goes on a trip to find him, and he finds him being tortured. So basically what happens is the dragons try to recruit them into their gang for reasons. There's a lot of weird plot holes in this film. They're at the restaurant again, and there's their boss is a creepy like pervert guy, and then the mom also works there, and he takes out a gun. And where Kevin said that this kid has really good acting, that was like a really hard scene to watch, because I guess it's hard for a kid to say like drop it motherfucker. Like I guess I get that to a certain sense, but that seemed just like really unbelievable. And then he leaves his mom, takes Sonny with him. So basically, they go through the initiation phase of becoming the Green Dragons. We learn about the other gangs, most importantly, the White Tigers. So there's Paul and Chen, who are the leaders of the Green Dragons. And Paul is kind of like the cold, calculated leader, and Chen is the like enabler root guy. So basically, what was the like? And this kind of goes like pretty far, so I don't want to give up away too much. But like, what do you guys think of like the initiation scenes were like giving them weed and prostitutes? And
First off, I mean, that's a good way to indoctrinate people. But I was very confused as to what the timeline was when Steven left and when he came back, because like Sonny said it was only a few days, but it felt like an eternity. But when like Steven came back, he was like fully indoctrinated, like complete, like healed from all of the beatings and wounds and everything like that, like pulling out a gun, like gonna kill motherfuckers, doesn't give a shit about his mom. Like he got indoctrinated fast. And I don't know, I guess like child psychology, maybe that's what happens. Not really big into the whole child soldiers and stuff like that. Haven't done a lot of research, Coney 2012 or whatever, but I was just like very surprised as to how quickly that happened. And because it was one scene, it was like Steven's getting beat up and Paul walks in and he's like, stop. And then the next scene, all of a sudden Steven is just like fucking pulling out like a 9/11, threatening to shoot this guy and trying to kidnap his brother and fuck my mom. I don't give a fuck about you anymore. That just like really blew my mind. I don't get it.
I thought it was just like the rest of the film, where it was again just over the top, almost to a point where it just made me kind of say, when's the next scene coming? I mean, even from the point where they had those rules that they were supposed to follow, like always use a thump gun or always shoot a guy in the head, like never shoot a white person. Like it was. We'll talk about this, and maybe this will be the first reference, but we talked about Goodfellas, right? And that being a really famous movie. Well, this movie was very similar to Goodfellas in a lot of different ways. From having two poignant main characters that play off each other, from Ray Liotta and Robert De Niro, to also having that third character, that Joe Pesci style character. There's also a couple of other references in general, from like the rules of the Gangster and just the way that film that was shot and set up. I know we were talking about the initiation there, but it just reminded me of that film. And obviously Scorsese being, the father of that entire film. So these kind of will go hand in hand in that circumstance. But other than that, the scene got the point across, which is what you're going for there.
I'm currently rewatching The Wire, and that TV show does such an amazing job of showing like how kids get indoctrinated into gangs. And this movie does such a sloppy like job, and it really skips over probably a lot of the steps like that lead up to kids actually joining gangs, And it's not just like one day they wake up and they're like, yeah, I can probably kill somebody, That's kind of what this movie says. I'm sure that in real life, these actual kids that, joined these gangs, they probably went through a lot more to get them to that point.
So again, in a movie that really, I don't know if I want to call them plot holes, but there's just a lot of things that don't make sense. And so Steven pulls the short straw because there was an argument at a gang get together, and they said, "Hey, you want to come be in? You gotta kill one of these. You gotta kill these guys playing like mahjong or something like that." So they go in to kill these guys. These they can't be more than 12-year-old kids. Pretty much with no hesitation, Steven tries to kill these guys, but his gun jams. And sure enough, Sony was there behind him to take care of the gangsters, and then he got a lot of the praise and the credit from that. And I think, Eric, you put up a really good point. How many 12-year-olds, how long has this taken where you're ready for 12-year-olds to lock and load and kill grown-ass men? That scene seemed so out of place. They didn't kill lower people on the totem pole, Am I the only one thinking that?
Yeah, it seemed pretty rushed.
Well, it seemed like also the reason that they did it is because that's kind of how we're introduced to Paul, who's their leader, and he tries to sell them on something, and they tell him to basically GTFO. And then it's okay, then I'll go back to my gang and make them pull straws, and one of them has to go kill one of those guys. And it's is that how that works? Is that how that whole situation is supposed to run?
You cross
and
Paul.
You want the small child to do it. Okay, you're the leader for a reason. I guess this works for you.
Well, and this movie could have been so much better than what it was, because it lost in a lot of the dialogue. There's some key components that I really wish they focused more on, where with Paul, they kind of show the religious aspect with the suit of armor and all them praying and stuff like that, and towards the end they kind of talk about how Paul, they worship Paul and stuff like that, but it's lost in these weird montages and poorly shot scenes. And then even with the kids' indoctrination, I believe Steven, when he's telling Sonny to join him, has some pretty good dialogue about how you could be a slave and stay a slave, or you can come join us and you can get the power and stuff like that. And that's why a lot of people go that route and with the child soldiers and stuff. But it was just very kind of lost in the cinema. The cinematography didn't follow it, and the dialogue was so kind of muddled up that these little tidbits were very good, but just kind of lost. And it could have been so much better. I wish it was, but these little tidbits, I was oh, that's interesting that Paul had kind of a cult following, but that was never explored. If it was, it was very poorly done, and it was just kind of a throwaway line. It's no, that's what they should have focused on, but instead we focused on poorly shot fight scenes and too many fade cuts in slow motion with an electric guitar playing as they're going.
Yes.
Fucking what the hell's going on? We just watched I just watched this guy shoot a gun for about 15 seconds, and it's the same scene over and over and over again. I don't know what the hell's going on. But
And
continue on, my friend.
Backing off your dialogue commentary and critique there, the switching between the closed captioning and the English was just ridiculous for me. Half conversations would have subtitled, and then they'd switch back to English and then go back to subtitle, even with the same characters. And then the next scene with that same character, they wouldn't do it again. There was no consistency at all, and it pissed me off to no end.
Yep.
So there's that.
Yeah, of course. And then, I really did like you said, there was certain sprinkle of hope in this movie, every couple scenes. And Paul says to Sonny that dishwasher in America can have a dream. He can always dream of getting out of being a dishwasher. But a fisherman in China will always be a fisherman in China. And I thought that was a really profound line, and I really, like you said, I wish they would have done more with it instead of just random shit just to get to the next scene and have their terrible twist. Basically, after they shoot these guys, they pretty much, I don't know how much time they jump into the future. I'm sure it's late 80s, and I'm sure they're supposed to still be teenagers, maybe 18, 19 years old, but they're played by 25-year-old actors, so kind of don't really know how old they are, but time has passed. And what really happens is that shows like how they have been promoted to lieutenants. They're doing really great in the gang. And then the rival gang, White Tigers, show up for like really no reason. Did anyone understand the reason why they initially attacked?
I think it was a random shooting. When the boss of the Green Dragons meets with the White Tigers guy says, "Sorry, I can't control all my men," or, those guys were just being idiots. So I think it was just a random, like, fuck, I'm going to go shoot up the Green Dragons right quick,
Gangland violence, right?
Yeah. Terrible shot scene.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk about
camera.
also that growing up montage.
Yeah.
Little kid turns into grown man. I was like, where have I seen this before? Oh, it's The Lion King. They literally took it from The Lion King.
Oh my God, that's right. Oh, we move.
And I also want to talk about that quote you were saying, like, in America, a dishwasher can have a dream, and in China, a fisherman is just a fisherman. Well, actually, I think this movie comments on how the American dream is actually really like a fallacy. Like, and a lot of gangster movies are the same. They all have that same comment. Goodfellas, Godfather, more specifically Godfather Part 2, and the TV show The Sopranos. It all kind of says upward mobility in our country is actually extremely tough, especially for people of color, immigrants, and, people on the lower on the totem pole. A lot of them have to turn to crime to get that upward mobility and to have more money or to get more money. Yeah, this movie is trying to say that, I think, but doing a really poor job of doing it.
No, they did a terrible job. Like, so you have two main characters. Make one of them, realize that gang life isn't like the way out. You know, like why don't I not go that route instead of they're both being horrible?
Yeah.
I say plot hole because it's kind of a funny pun. But during the White Tigers invasion of Safe House, it apparently has no safety regulations. Like they don't have any cameras or anything, which is pretty great for a gang. 'Cause where was the camera? Where was the security guy? I don't know. They shot up the place. Steven gets shot, I believe, 7 or 8 times.
8.
8 times.
Although his bandages only showed 6. Whatever.
He's on the
counting?
ventilator.
Who's counting?
Cold.
It's not
Who's
looking...
counting?
Anyway.
We needed the one math comment. He's on the ventilator. He's not breathing. Or he's on the ventilator, so he needs help to breathe. Sonny's in a terrible wreck. He pulls through, and then you fast forward to the movie because he's in the hospital for a while, but no physical therapy, no lasting ailments. He just gets shot 8 times, and he's really kind of the same character for the rest of the movie. And I was like, why isn't this guy limping the rest of his life, or in a wheelchair? So that's when the movie really started going way downhill for me. That and the introduction of Tina, whose father becomes very important in the film. Her father plays like an old musician, and she goes up, and Sonny goes up to her because he started getting googly eyes for her. She says, "No, I don't date gang members," and then he's like, "Come on," and she's like, "Okay," and that was that. And I really was like, it's a gangster movie, so I guess the romance doesn't have to be great, but I really put down like terrible on-screen chemistry. She wasn't that very interesting, and he was kind of busy doing other shit the entire movie. So what do you guys think of this romance? Was it forced? Was it good? Was it bad? Was it whatever? Cole.
Yeah, so like kind of what I alluded to at the very beginning. It took me longer than I care to admit to realize how everyone was related in this film. And like none of the relationships felt real or I cared about them at all. Like I literally did not care about those two's relationship, or like it took me a while to realize that was her dad until she freaked out on Sonny and was just like, I can't believe you did that to my dad. It's like, have I seen this character before? I genuinely don't remember seeing him until that scene where I don't know. I just felt like all the relationships were very hollow and bland and boring and just not good.
as soon as we meet Tina, right away you get that very super cliche movie idea where the two main characters have the quick glances across the bar, and you know that these two are destined to be star-crossed lovers for the rest of the film. And that is just painful for me right away too. It's like, oh, all right, well, there's that part of this film that we were waiting for. If we got all the rest of the gratuitous gangster stuff, now we need the love trope where they can't be together because of the mob violence that we've seen in a bunch of other movies, which leads to the rest of this as well. I thought that character placement was super weak. Like, so I guess apparently her dad saved Paul's life, right? That was the whole thing. Paul couldn't, he had to protect him because he saved his life at one point or another.
It was that the dad's son was killed by something that Paul was involved in, and so Paul would take care of them forever to save face. Face is very important for Chinese people.
True. Yes.
Yeah, and I felt like the writing of the female protagonist was so, like, it was, like, two-dimensional, not three-dimensional. Kelly, yeah, like, I said this to you when we were watching it. Like, what did you think of that, the female character, how she was written?
Well, I forget exactly how our interaction went, but I'm thinking about it now, and I'm just insulted.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It's just rude to even put a character in there that you're going to do so little with and just be an object for another character to possibly give them more of a purpose. And then not even succeed on that front.
And then wax her at the end, like, just...
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was so weird.
Whoa!
They did her dirty.
Spoiler
They did her
alert.
unnecessary. And I understand it's based on a true story, so she existed and she testified against this whole gang. What a brave woman.
Yes.
Give her a real story. Give her a real character. How insulting.
Again, I don't really know if I
Kelly,
believe
did you
that
not see
part. Because there is no way on God's green earth, again, you want to talk about not bullet holes, but plot holes. There is no way on earth because she talks scared they would drop an entire case against the gang. That makes literally no sense from the law. And then she testifies in front of them while being harassed, and they're like, "Oh, you know what? We're not going to give you witness protection."
Yeah.
No.
Well, so
no.
you know.
No.
What I realized was watching this movie, I start to realize that the name of the movie is basically what it is. It's Revenge of the Green Dragon. So she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna testify against you guys." It's like, "No, you're not. We're gonna get revenge on you." And then, I'm gonna spoil it here. Sonny is like, "I'm gonna, I'm gonna get rid of the Green Dragons. I'm gonna try and protect her. Yada yada yada." And then at the end, he gets fucking killed, and Paul goes on with his life, and it's all a sham. Stupid.
Yeah, let's talk about the title. Like, the Revenge of the Green Dragon sets it up and makes it feel like they're supposed to be the good guys, right? Or they're supposed to be
right?
And they're what? Like, it just doesn't make any sense at all. Like, the film itself is portraying them there's no revenge.
Maybe against the White Tigers, I guess. But,
but
barely.
Ridiculous.
I did like it. I
Dumb
felt
title.
like it was a revenge is an evil thing. It's never a good thing. Regardless
Don't
of
tell
how
that to the Avengers.
I know, exactly. But regardless of how we want to make it a heroic thing, it always comes from bad, and it always results in bad, and it's not the way to resolve anything ever. And I thought that something interesting throughout the movie was I was like, okay, it's revenge against this guy's aunt, who they go Clockwork Orange on. Or now it's revenge on this girl who tried to testify against them. Oh, now it's revenge on the first one who even joined the gang. It never ends. It's always justified because it's revenge, and it's never a good thing. Yeah. So I liked the title.
That's a good point.
I support your analysis, Kelly.
Yep.
Good job.
So I think
Bowing.
This is
for
where
audio listeners, I took a bow.
Yeah, I'll point out a little thing about adapting screenplays. Whenever you adapt a screenplay, you can you stick to the main points of a story, but you have freedom to kind of play with dialogue a lot. Like, obviously, you're never going to know what people said to each other in a closed-off room when there was nothing being recorded. And so you have the freedom to do that, and you have to hit the major points, and then you have, some freedom to, play with a story a little bit. But this went so far outside of that. It wasn't focused enough, one, but two, I feel like they played with the facts a lot. Like, they got a lot of the main facts in this film. Probably that trial was real where the girl, snitched on them, and then that, the main boss, she was a real person. But it feels like a lot of the other stuff in this film was really playing loose with the facts. So.
Well, exactly. Yeah. There were times when it felt cartoonish.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I just wanted to throw out there that Ray Liotta was in this film.
Yeah,
we have yet to talk about him because
he was in it for 10 minutes.
Maga Michael.
He doesn't.
Maga Michael.
Literally makes no sense why he's even in the film. He could not have existed at all. They literally just threw him in there because it's Ray Liotta. They put him on a bunch of posters and shit. It was like, look, we got Ray Liotta in a mobster movie. It's gonna be sick. And then he's fucking never there.
He's literally
his performance. He was sleepy. He was like half asleep.
He was a MAGA FBI agent who just is really angry at immigrants.
Also, this film is like it seems very anti.
Yeah, and it was made by Chinese people, which is insane.
Yeah, like a Hong Kong director was like, you know what? We're gonna make a movie, and it's gonna be very anti-immigration.
I don't tend to agree with that because I kind of think like what Eric said a couple minutes ago was that I think that they were really trying to show like how hard it is to live in America when you are an underprivileged minority. They just did it so terribly it looked like they hated immigrants.
No, I think the FBI agent definitely did not like immigrants, but...
Oh, no, he was definitely a racist. Don't get me wrong. But, like, he was kind of like the overt, like, scary clown racist, you know?
Yeah.
But the more racial undertones of... again, one of the things that I really, really liked about this movie was that, in every gang movie we have 3 rules, make money, don't backstab on your brothers. And this one, it's like, also don't kill white people because then we get attention. And I'm like, that probably actually happened.
That's probably real.
Yeah, that's real.
Because guess what? Steven kills a white guy and their whole, like, world falls apart.
Yeah.
So... yeah, that was very interesting again to me. I wish they would have done more with that theme of, maybe they had like a gentrification scene or something like that, and they're like finding out. I don't know. I'm not a rights screenwriter, but the same cookie cutter bullshit that they did for an hour and a half just really wore thin.
Yeah.
On me.
Well, so the Chinese cop, that scene where he was talking to the FBI agent, Chinese isn't a language, it's a family of languages. And then you just saw the FBI agent just stop giving a shit, turn the other cheek. I don't want to listen to this right now. It's just like, I'm sure there's FBI agents.
I thought that was a good scene, by the way.
So I'm not sure if Michael Bloom is an actual person, because a lot of times also when you adapt screenplays, you can make an amalgam of characters and put them into one character. So he might have just represented actually 4 or 5 people.
He was Reagan cop guy. That's what he was.
He probably represented several people.
To jump back in our timeline of us explaining things about this movie, they didn't introduce the detective as a detective at first. I had no idea who his character was. I didn't know why he was asking questions. And then he was going back to back with these guys who go, speak Chinese to me, you asshole. And then speak English, MFer. They're just harassing him. And I'm like, who even is he? And
Right. And
it was an interesting concept, poorly executed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, isn't he? So that's so take off of that, right? So we don't know this guy. We barely get a flush of his character at all. And then all of a sudden, he's the big zinger at the end. Sorry, spoiler alert. What the shit? Why would you have that as your choice when you barely have him as a character of interest?
Right.
And all of a sudden, now he's the big guy that saves the day and the conclusion. It was a terrible decision by the writing team, and I just was left with my jaw
I thought it was going to be Ray Liotta.
Yeah, right.
When he got shot,
I just thought he shot him in the head.
Shit.
I thought it was just going to be... That was it.
Ray Liotta with a revolver in the back. Turns out, no, not Ray Liotta at all.
He got shit on too. I mean, that's pretty important.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I would have never thought that would have been a callback. That is so fucking weird.
No, I just want to talk about the ending scene where Sonny gets shot. So that scene when he pulls the trigger. So if you count from when he pulls the trigger to when you find out that he got shot in the head, there is 4 slow motion fades with music that occur. Literally 4 scenes where it's shoots and then it's just staring and then weird slow motion fade to another scene where he's pointing the gun and then another slow motion fade and then there's 4 of them. holy shit, we get it. The guy shot a gun and we don't know what the fuck is going on. After about the second, it was like, it's been 30 seconds. Obviously, something did not happen that we thought it was going to happen. We get it. Just move on. We don't need to extend this.
Yes.
Like, unless you're trying to hit your 90-minute, hour and a half mark, whatever, you could have done better, but it drove me crazy. I hated it.
And there's speaking of like weirdly placed visual effects, there was the scene like we just talked about meeting with the detective up on the rooftop, and they did the 5 seconds of the sped up clouds and fast paced like background, and then just stopped. That was it.
And the
That was
hair
it.
flying.
Yeah, right, exactly. Really fast, out of place. I rewinded it to watch it again to see if I actually had saw that. I was like, really? That just seems so completely out of the blue. And it really was just out of the blue for no reason. Let's just do a time lapse. Hooray.
So we clearly jumped all around.
No.
I think
Just like the plot, just like the movie.
Yeah.
We're shimmying all over the place. Who cares? It's Martin Scorsese.
that was terrible.
Movie was shit.
Okay, I got a question. Here, Blaze, I got a question for you. I got a question for the group.
Yeah.
Has any of you guys seen NCIS? If you
Yes.
have, would you say this is better or worse than an episode of NCIS? Because, goddamn it, this made me
Worse.
just feel like I was watching,
Yeah.
like, midday, like, shitty, just, like,
Nah, man.
TV show cop drama. Like, I just couldn't get over how terrible the visuals were, how terrible the shots were, and everything.
The
else.
script
This
was
is just-
terrible. Like, this, I would rather watch NCIS than watch what we
The
watched.
music,
Like, honestly, there was
the music in here
nothing.
was horrible. It was definitely
Yeah.
bad.
probably all royalty-free music. Like I
just
do other podcasts where I use royalty-free music, and I like try to sift through sift through dozens of songs before I find something I like. And this movie seems like they just sifted through like 10 songs and picked one random like royalty-free song.
yeah, just like the random interludes of guitar music throughout the
Yeah.
entire thing, like from the opening scene to the ending
Constant.
scene. It was
Loved
like
it.
almost
Loved it.
consistently.
Oh my
Like,
God.
why?
It wasn't bad. It was just like it just became very obvious, the sound design, and the music. Like it like became annoying because it became so obvious,
Well, when you have like a 10-second sample of like an electric guitar and you stretch it over like a minute montage of like a slow
Yeah.
motion, you're like, okay.
Kevin?
So since we're all asking questions now, why do you think that A24 picked up this movie and ran with it? Do we really think it was just because it was an Asian American?
Yeah.
Oh, right. So
Martin
it was an
Scorsese,
indie
yeah.
film that was an Asian-built, film with unknown actors. Right. We have a YouTube personality. We have a guy from the Disney Channel. We have a dude
Yeah.
played in Glee. Like, we have a bunch of random people. They didn't decide to use well-known American Asian actors. They went with a bunch of unknown individuals. And then Scorsese, and I said this in the group chat, but I think it's nepotism, right? So it's the idea that he has to thank Jordan, or our director, because The Departed only exists because of this guy's original movie in 2004, 2002, or whatever it was, right? So Scorsese gets his Oscar because of this, and now he has to thank, here's your reward. I'll add my name to your new movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was
Blaze,
my vibe on it.
Come on, Blaze.
Well, I think you said it all. I think Martin Scorsese was attached to the film. I think it was based on one director. I don't know Andrew Liu worked. He must have worked on the other movie. But Andrew Lau worked on the movie that gave Martin Scorsese his Oscar. So I'm sure he had a lot of faith in him to get, the type of movie that Martin Scorsese likes to do and make. I bet you he thought they had in the bag. So A24 takes the leap on this because, again, we go back to Charles Swan, right? Where all that big, named actors were behind them. So why not? That would probably generate buzz, at least within the United States. And then because of the Asian protagonists, or not even just protagonists, it was an Asian cast, that might do good in the East too. It was all a marketing move. And it just kind of blew up in their face because it wasn't a good movie.
Yeah, I think
How much
also
involvement?
A24 went through a lull here ever since Life After Beth. Life After Beth, then you had Tusk, then you had Laggies. You have this movie. Next week we have The Captive, which is also not reviewed well. I think whoever was running the studio during this time, I mean, it was probably the same. It probably was the same people, but I think they went through a real lull of picking some pretty shitty movies. And luckily A24 turned that around. This kind of lull in movies, of bad movies to distribute, it's enough to kill a film studio, and luckily that didn't happen with them. But yeah.
With this for me, as someone who got into this podcast because I like current A24 films and going through, and there's peaks and valleys in our life, and we are deep in a bad valley right now, and it is making me wonder why A24 survived as long as it did. And it's clear that they have all kinds of connections to these actors and everything, because that seems to be the draw of any of these movies that just are not enjoyable to watch time after time. And it makes me lose respect for A24, which I can bury deep in this podcast. Nobody ever heard me say that. And it's crazy that anything good comes out of a lull of this much bad.
Yeah, like I think the A24 exec, saw the Scorsese and saw that, Andrew Lau had done some, decent films, had obviously made he made 3 of them. He made 3 of those movies in 2 years. The one that's based off The Departed, I can't remember the name of it, but he made 3 of them within 2 years. Like, the guy pumps out films all the time, so he's got to have a banger in there once. But, they saw it and they were like, fuck it, why not? Let's give this Hong Kong guy a shot, which, to be fair, back in 2014, even now, we're still struggling. Now, this, last couple of years, we've had a big push for a lot of, Asian-based films coming to, America and stuff like that, which I love, because I love a lot of those, like the Hard Boileds and the Seven Samurais and stuff like that. I'm all about it. But back then, there really wasn't a push, and A24 was giving people a shot, so I think they just said, fuck it, we'll do it. Granted, the film cost $5 million, and it only made $104K or something like that. It did terrible, absolutely atrocious. But, I think that's the reason why they did it. They saw the big ticket names like Ray Liotta and Martin Scorsese and was like, easy money, we'll give them some, we'll have at it. And then they lost their ass. It was like, this is not good. Also, this movie did not fit any A24 frame at all. This is not an A24 film at all. Like, if I watched this movie and didn't realize it was like an A24 film, and you were like, did you know A24 made this? And I was like, fuck you. No, they didn't. They don't. This is so uninspired and so just bland and has no feelings or vibes or life to it, and the cinematography is bad. There's no way I would have thought this was an A24 film.
I don't know about that. I do think as much as I don't like this movie, I do give it credit for the themes are there. There is a good story based on the themes, the setting, what these people went through, but it just didn't come out of this movie. But I think the A24 themes where you should sit back and think about a movie, they're definitely there within this movie. It just didn't come out. It was a bad sowing season.
Throw a little farmer's lingo in there, sowing for all of the non-farmers.
It was $5 million, you said? So, lowest.
Yeah. So, it felt like it was a direct-to-DVD or direct-to-streaming launch. And I think it really didn't have a very large theater base. It didn't release very much at all. I think it was per date appearances.
Yeah, it went around to international film festivals, and that was kind of the biggest.
Yeah, because that's where it debuted in the Toronto Film Festival, I believe, for the first time. When I posed the original question, I think it was just one of those things where they saw it, took a shot at it, and they didn't really have anything else going on during that time period, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So, any
ratings for me?
Any final thoughts? Any final things to bring up?
Was it ratings time?
We'll start with ratings. I am very, very excited to hear this one. Let's start out with the happy camper, Eric. He's been such a great grader this past couple weeks. So I'm sure he's got that A24 right in his pocket. What do we got for us, Eric?
I'm sorry that literally 3 weeks in a row, I think I'm going to be giving F24s. So this is going to be an F24 for me. I guess I'll talk a little bit just also about the ending, just how horrible that was. The detective being the guy that was the corrupt cop that was in with the gang, and it went through a little Usual Suspects flashback. That was just what the fuck? And all these horrible lines in this film. Look at me, Sonny. I am the American dream. And I've died many times in the name of America. The hate, this is what this country is built on. And there's a storm coming, detective, and I don't know any umbrella that will keep the city dry. And I mean,
favorite.
Geez. shoot me in the head. The freeze frames on the guns, just everything, all these choices that they made for this movie, they were so horrible. And it's sad because, like, I feel like they found a very good story to make a movie out of. And I feel they just completely failed at it, didn't do it justice. And, like, the theme is there with, like, a lot of these gangster films, like we've talked about. It's really about how immigrants and people of color, you know, they have a very tough time to have upward mobility in our country. And just especially, you know, 80s, 90s up to today, it's when the middle class was really getting depleted and, you know, actually making a way in this country. You can't really just work an honest job anymore. You got to do other things. And that is, you know, why people turn to crime, in my opinion. And they had that theme there, but they just didn't do it justice. And it's really sad to see. And so F24, 3 F24s in a row for me. Yeah.
All right, Cole, since this is your first week back, let's hear what you got.
Obviously, I did not like this movie. I think it failed on almost every aspect. It could have been better. I'm gonna have to go with Eric. Like, I really can't feel good about myself even giving it like an E24. Like, I'm just gonna go F24, man. Like, I did not like this movie. There's so many other like better, even Hong Kong or like Asian films. Like, again, if you want to see a good one, go watch Hard Boiled, watch The Raid Redemption, watch It Man, there's so many other better films out there that do the action and all that stuff way better. Even like what is it, old dog or old boy or whatever. Like, come on, just do something better. Do something better with your life. Watch those movies. Don't watch this. This movie sucks. Watch Goodfellas if you really want something mob related with Martin Scorsese and yeah.
All right,
I'll move on.
Kelly, can you bring it up? It's got a 0.0 GPA right now.
We've touched on all the bad things, and I would touch on them too, but you're already listening to this. You don't need to hear it again. There are a couple good things. Costume design is one we didn't touch on. I thought the way that all of the gangs were designed, as far as their outfits, was really well done. Okay, that's a good thing. That said as well, I think that there's a certain like kitschy, kind of campy element about this movie. It's so cheesy. It's so cliched in so many ways. And there's a lot of spots, like when Eric was saying it, you hear how quotable these cheesy phrases are, as long as you're not trying to take it too seriously. I felt like it was a TV movie, and one that, even though I watched the whole thing, it felt like I just flipped to the channel 5 minutes ago at any given time. But because it's kind of campy and cheesy, I have a little bit of a soft spot for that. So I think we're going to go E24.
All right.
Wow. Best
E as in Evanescence, right?
What?
E as in Evanescence,
Sure.
right? Okay.
Whatever. Yeah, E.
So, like Kelly mentioned, we've talked about the bad things. We've talked about one good thing. I am left more wondering why this movie was made at all. Why that we find ourselves in this discussion to begin with. I alluded to it earlier, where I think it was a reward for a good screenplay that Scorsese got his hands on and allowed him to make The Departed, which I love personally and one of my favorite films. And clearly, we have this film to thank for that. That being said, the acting was not very good. We kind of talked about the music and we talked about all of the other parts about it. It does not really serve as much more than a blip in the radar in A24, and perhaps they learned from their mistakes. And these lulls that we talked about is going to allow them to find out all the crappy movies, and what's what make the good movies come down the line. I'd like to think that's the case anyway, because gosh, this was terrible. I am also going to join in on the F's, but I'm going to give it an F+, so I give myself a little bit lower to go, because it at least wasn't just like the worst drizzling shits ever. It was okay.
There's F-.
Yeah,
I
suppose.
could do F-.
So I suppose. Yeah, well, all right, actually, yeah, F+. We're sticking with F+.
Okay. Very cool.
Sounds
very
fun.
Cool. I'm sure Kevin's like, why did I join this podcast at this point?
No, I love it. It's a highlight of my week. Are you kidding me? It's just not when we watch
Want me to
shitty
give you my
movies
best
like this.
Departed Jack Nicholson impression?
Please, I love it. I need
When I
it.
tell
yeah.
you to dump a body in the mosh, you dump it in the mosh! Not where some guy from John Hancock goes every Thursday to get a fucking blowjob!
I love it. I love it. Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch is also wonderful.
Also, that umbrella line should definitely be a T-shirt. I think that would be really cool. There's not much more I could say about this movie. The other big thing that I wrote, I have like all these mad scientist notes. I wrote exposition jump in every scene, and my questioning this week was kind of to prove that, because we got like 40 minutes in and I still like barely got past like the first couple scenes. Like them being teenagers is like the meat and potatoes of the movie, and I'm like, no, it's gonna be a 5-hour podcast if I talk about every scene, because it's just that much exposition jump. The other crazy thing for my notes that I wrote was, my first write was paint by numbers Goodfellas, and I crossed that out. And then I wrote less socially conscious Scarface, and I crossed that out. And then I ended up with my favorite, if The Warriors was an even worse movie.
Nice.
But
You leave that movie alone.
I like it. It's campy, like Kelly said about this movie, but man, the cheese was real in this one. I am going to be a little bit more forgiving because, like I said, there were themes that I really, really liked, and it is a genre that I think can be done well. And if you go back to the drawing board and you make this a better movie, you get better actors, maybe this is a movie. In its current state, it's not a movie. But I do think that the thought and effort was in there, the execution was terrible. So I am also going to give it an A24. I'm not going to feel good about it, but I really don't see this movie being worse than some of the other movies that we've seen. And it was only an hour and a half long, so it did give me that I didn't have to.
Is this the worst rated? Is this the worst rated movie now?
I think
so.
this will be our
Definitely.
worst rated one.
I've never given below a D
because
before.
Tusk,
So
Blaze gave Tusk a C-24, and there's nothing above an E.
I don't think any of us gave Charles Swan an out. So.
No,
because Charles Swan had
Charles
actually
Swan,
some decent parts to it.
That was
I
a
would
great
watch that before
E24.
this.
This will probably maybe end up with an average of F+.
even if
24.
that one
at
chick
least
doesn't know how to
Charles Swan
shoot
has
a
Bill
bow,
Murray
I'd
in
rather
it.
watch that than this movie. I'll tell you that much.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good to have you back,
Who
Cole.
wore
I
the
love your
headband
rants.
last
Let's do
week?
it more often. Kelly.
And so I have a petition for everyone. Instead of saying genre from now on, can we say genre?
No.
Like Alex
Genre.
Trebek?
No.
Yeah, I'm down.
There's like a supercut on YouTube of Alex Trebek. He always just says genre.
Only
instead of
if
genre.
every time we say aluminum,
he-
we have to say aluminium.
Aluminium. Yeah. I can't.
Aluminium in the microwave.